What's going on, everybody? I'm here to do another movie review, this time for Scream 6. Of course, the follow-up to Scream 5. I guess you can officially call it Scream 5 because last year when it came out, it just said Scream. But really, I think what they were doing, it was alluding to, is that they're starting to transition into a new direction with the film. In case y'all haven't noticed, I'm a huge fan of the Scream franchise. I have seen all of them. And I think one of the reasons why I like this franchise so much as far as horror goes is because this is one of the few franchises that has been around since my childhood. The first one came out in 96. I was 7 years old. Then the next one came out in 97. I was 8. 2011. Then the next one came out in 2011, 21 going on 22. And then the last one came out last year, and now this one. So I practically have grown up with this franchise, and it's one of the few franchises that was around since I've been around. Of course, you know, you have your classics, but those were around, and by the time I watched them, they weren't considered fresh or new anymore. At least with these was considered fresh and new. So with that being said, let's get into the review. So this movie takes place in another location. For the first time ever, Scream is not taking place in the city of Woodsboro, California, where the movies have taken place. As a matter of fact, it's it's the only time that it has been out of the state. This is not the first time it's been out of the Woodsboro location, because if you remember in the third one, they were in Hollywood, Los Angeles, more so to speak, with that particular one. But the rest of them were more Woodsboro related. But this time we have taken Ghostface out of California and we have transplanted him 3,000 miles away to the East Coast in the Big Apple in New York. I think that was a very smart and strategic move for them to make. I would say it was probably a risky move because everyone's familiar with the typical Woodsboro location. But I think it was actually dope that they actually transitioned to New York. And to have this movie set at Halloween, which is perfect because now you have the Big Apple is New York. Is a lot of people. You know, New York is a very crowded, busy place. There's a lot of different people there. Halloween, everybody's wearing costumes and everything like that. And the thing about this is that it could be just about anybody. And what I liked about this movie, slightly above some of the others and previous ones, is that with this one, anyone you thought was the killer was not. So by the time I got halfway through the movie, I just gave up with trying to figure out who the killers were, because it wasn't dawning on to me or probably anybody in the audience who it was as far as who the killer was in this movie, because again, it could have been anybody. The other ones I was kind of able to predict who the killer was based on some of the maneuvers a little bit. But this one, they literally wrote it so well to the point where I could not even remotely guess who it was. And when they did reveal who the killer was, it was the furthest from my mind who the killer is in this movie. So now that, you know, they moved, Sam and Tara's character, they have moved out of Woodsboro. They've been there in New York for about 6 months. I guess, this is pretty much a fresh start for them. Sam is, she's in therapy because of everything that has gone on with her in the previous movie, and then finding out that she's Billy Loomis's daughter. And that's enough to make anybody go to therapy. And all the events that happen there, she's trying to start new. She's trying to start fresh, and everything seems to be going good for her. But unfortunately, her past continues to haunt her because of the events that occurred in the last one. People spread rumors online and basically saying she was the reason as to why what happened in the last movie happened. They're trying to make it seem like she was the killer, or she was the one that influenced her boyfriend to do what he did in the movie. In the movie. And she's trying to cope with all of that while taking care and watching after her sister Tara, who's just basically trying to move on from this. She's trying to move past it. She's trying to live her life. She's trying to just be a college student, and she's, with her friends and all types of stuff like that. They also brought back the Chad and Mindy character from, because they were the other survivors from the previous movie, and they also too went to New York with Sam and Tara. So now they have their own group, sort of like how in the originals you had Sydney, Gail, and Dewey, where they were that group that was carrying the first few films. And it seems like to me, this is what they're trying to do with this next slot of films. Also in this movie, you also have Gail coming back. She's, the sole survivor, she's of the movies. Unfortunately, we lost Dewey in Scream 5. And this is not so much a spoiler alert. Sydney was not present at all in this movie. I hope that this isn't a spoiler for anybody. It's really not, because if you've been following the news, it was pretty much public knowledge for like over a year now that Neve Campbell was not going to return to the franchise. I think due to like contract issues. I think she wanted more money and they wasn't willing to negotiate with her, even though many people said that they should give it to her, because she's literally been carrying this franchise for 20 some odd years. So, they didn't budge to whatever demand she had, and they ended up not casting her for anything in this movie. I thought that they actually tried to negotiate something, and that they were going to squeeze her in there somewhere, but I guess that was a rumor because she just was not present in this film. For some people, that might actually be a con, but it also could be seen as a crutch that they're still using Sydney's character when it seems like they're trying to move away from her character, especially if you've seen Scream 5, where her character was not that present in the movie. In the Scream movies, Sydney's character usually comes probably within the first 5 to 10 minutes of the film. In Scream 5, she didn't come into the film until like about good 30-40 minutes into the movie. So that's how you knew she wasn't going to, have this big role, and it was almost like a passing of the torch type of thing. But Sydney, unfortunately was not present in the movie, even though they did bring her name up a couple of times in the movie to let people know that, hey, Sydney Prescott is still alive and well. She's good. She's still in existence. She's not written out of the franchise by any means. It's just that I guess it was a negotiation, a contract issue with money when it came to the actress Neve Campbell and the producers of this film. So it just, it is what it is. They even mentioned Dewey a couple of times in this movie. So, it's like some continuity there that, hey, even though his character has been killed off, he's still mentioned and, he's still remembered in this movie. Also, speaking of returning characters, a fan favorite from Scream 4 returned, and that was Kirby, played by Hayden Panettiere. She was, of course, a fan favorite almost instantly in the fourth movie. I remember when I saw the fourth movie right before I graduated from college back in 2011. Me and 2 other people, my classmates, we went to go see it. And everybody loved her character. So when we thought that she had died, everybody in the theater was like, oh my God, what happened? Because everybody just gravitated naturally to her character. But then they kind of spilled the beans a little bit in Scream 5 when they said that, they talked to a survivor and her name popped up on the screen. Someone who has very good vision pointed that out and let people know that she was still very much alive and well, especially since in the movie, in Scream 4, when she got stabbed, we didn't see her actually die. She just kind of laid there, and then they just went away from it, and we never heard from her character again. They never specified if she was alive or anything like that, because they didn't even bring her name up really anymore for the rest of that movie. So we're just sitting back wondering, did she die? Is she still alive? So it was one big question mark and one big mystery for years. But, when we heard that she was casted again, everybody was like, yes, we knew she was alive. So she did return in this movie. And this time around, she is an FBI agent, out of, she went to, after she left Woodsboro, she went to Atlanta to relocate there. And then when she hears about the killings starting to happen again, and this time in New York, she instantly came to New York because she has a connection with this. She was a victim herself, and she's dealt with this. So she has firsthand experience on how to deal or try to tackle this particular situation. So, now everybody's here. We have some new characters that have been introduced. I'm not going to go too much detail of that because these characters that they introduced, especially 2 of them in particular, have a huge part to play as far as the plot goes. So really it's like the mission, I would say, because, Ghostface always has a motive. And I believe the motive with this one is just to get away from, sequels and everything like that. This time they're talking about franchises. As we all know, Scream has become a franchise. In some cases, it can be seen as now as an iconic franchise that was started by the late great horror king himself, or one of them, Wes Craven, who unfortunately passed away, I believe shortly after the 4th Scream came out, because I think that was the last Scream movie he directed. I think it was no, it wasn't shortly after. I think it was a few years later, but I think it was shortly before they started working on Scream 5. Because of course they would have called him back in to do it. But it is what it is. So this time they're really tackling the topic of franchises. You know, what keep franchises going? What makes people want to go back to the original? What makes people want to keep doing these things over and over and over again? And they're just basically coming back to the consensus of, you know, franchises is what people are going for nowadays. And when you think about it, a lot of the stuff that they actually mention in this movie can play out either in the media, in entertainment, and in real life. So I like how they was able to pull from that in order to create this kind of story. The kills in this movie were brutal. I thought the kills in Scream 5 were brutal, but I think this one might have eclipsed that because they went in with some of these kills, and it's just like, I wonder how many buckets of fake blood did they have to go through in order to pull this off. It's just crazy how much it's crazy. And the way, I wonder how much water they probably used, because the amount of times that a lot of the people were sweating in this movie was just crazy. The blood, it's a lot. And I like that they've really gone there a lot, you know, over the years when it comes to this franchise, because that's what Scream is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a gory, bloody type of film. And that's really what people, as far as fans of the franchise, keep coming back to watch the movie for, is for that element. Of course, we want it to be a good story and for the story to make sense. But what people pay to see this for is for those kills. And Ghostface definitely did these kills. And this was one of the most aggressive Ghostface killers I have ever seen. I'm talking about a person who doesn't give up and can take a few punches and hits to the face with objects and still get back up and continue to do what it is that they do. I would say that there wasn't that many chase scenes in this movie. But there was one chase scene in particular that was actually worth watching, and I'm glad that the chase scene went down the way that it did, considering that this person has had good chase scenes in the past. I would say one part of the movie that actually made me shake a little bit, and it takes a lot for me to even do that, was definitely the train sequence. That particular scene was actually kind of creepy. Imagine you being on a train and this killer is after you. It's Halloween. Everybody's wearing costumes. And then the sales of the Ghostface mask go up because Ghostface is killing people again. And you're seeing a bunch of people wearing Ghostface masks, and you don't know who, if that's a regular person or if that's the killer. And you're on a train with a bunch of people during Halloween at night while you're going through the tunnel. The lights are blinking and going in and out, and you can't see, like, what you probably once saw that was there is not there anymore. And then when you see them again, they start moving closer and closer to you, almost like they're jumping through frames. It reminds me of this haunted house that I went to called the Asylum back in 2009 at Carowinds, what was called Scarowinds because it was part of their Halloween. And we was walking through, and it was these strobe lights that were blinking and this rock music playing, and the person was walking slow, so it looked like they were jumping in and out of frames. That's what that train scene reminded me of, and that's probably why it made me shake a little bit, because I guess it kind of triggered back in my mind me going through that haunted house. But yeah, all in all, this movie was actually pretty good. I gotta say, I don't know what's in the water, but I think they're trying to step their horror game up this year. I mean, first we had Megan. I mean, Megan was a horror, but it wasn't that scary. It had scary elements to it. Cocaine Bear wasn't a horror movie. It was more of a comedy horror, but more comedy than horror, but it's still worth for what it was. And then you have, you know, Scream 6, which I probably consider to be like the very first horror-based type movie to kick off the horror genre this year. And the thing is, there's so many more horror movies coming out this year, and if they can stay on this same path and the same trajectory, I think that they can definitely help bring the horror genre back to where it's supposed to be. Because, you know, for a while people weren't really taking horror seriously. You know, horror was the rave back like in the 80s and 90s, even parts of the 70s, but then it kind of lost its luster a little bit. So, you know, it is what it is. And then, yeah, I think that this is the 6th Scream film. So a lot of people sometimes tap out after a while. But the thing about Scream is, versus like, you know, your Michael Myers and your Freddy Kruegers and your Jasons, is that those characters are one character. It's just one Michael Myers, one Jason, one Freddy Krueger. With Scream, anybody can be Ghostface. anybody can throw that mask on and it'll be them. It's not always the same person, because 9 times out of 10, well, 10 times out of 10, your goal is to kill the person who's doing the killing or terrorizing you and trying to kill you, in hopes that you do not fall victim to the terroristic acts of Ghostface. So I think that's why this franchise is able to work in the way that it does. But that's pretty much my review for Scream 6. Let me know down in the comments, is this a movie that you will go see? Is it a movie that you will pass on? Tell me down in the comments, have you seen any of the Scream movies? And if you have, which one is your favorite of the franchise?